Hi, it's Brian Gazinski at Super Shocks today. I'm going to take a little time here and talk about suspension travel and our relocation mount system and why we do what we do and how we do it, to give you a little better understanding of what it is that we're doing. I don't have a cameraman today, so I'm going to do it all myself. So be patient with me and understand that I'm solo. Shocks on your touring models, your Harley touring models, come in two different lengths. A 13-inch with a 3-inch travel, or a 12-inch with a 2-inch travel. With Super Shocks, we only make a 13-inch 3-inch travel, or 13.5 3-inch travel, or a 14-inch 3.5-inch travel. With the stock Harley suspension and swing arm setup here, we've only got enough room for a 13-inch 3-inch travel shock. That's the maximum length, because there's an interference point right here with the exhaust and the axle nut. Let me see if I can get it in there and show you that. Right here. So you can see right here, the axle nut to the muffler, that's the interference point. You can't use anything more than a 13-inch shock in that area. So with Super Shocks, we wanted to find a way to give the suspension as much travel as possible, because more travel is better ride quality. The less you can bottom out, the more enjoyment you get on the bike with ride quality. So we came up with a mounting kit. Nothing new. People have been making these for many years. It's just a mount that attaches to the swing arm to move the shock mounting point back. Typically these have always been used to lower the ride height. People take a set of these, they mount them on their bike, they use the same stock shock, put it back into this location. That's not a good idea. That creates other problems, and there's a lot of things that can be troubling with that kind of setup. With the way we do it, we make our own mounts. We make them so they fit tight to the swing arm. They lock into place. They cannot move when they're mounted. We build them with a steel stud, so the shock is very securely mounted. There's nothing to fail here. This is a bulletproof mount. The other thing that's important with these mounts is they're made to fit in exactly the right location to have clearance of the shock and saddlebag. A lot of mounts on the market do not account for that, and the shock ends up rubbing the saddlebag. You don't want that either. The other thing that they have a problem with a lot of times on different mounts is they don't have the right clearance in here. So the shock ends up hitting here. When the shock hits here and it's trying to go through the range of motion, that'll damage your shaft. It could even break the shaft on your shock. You don't want that to happen either. So these are some things that are very critical, issues that we've addressed and made foolproof on our setup to make sure everything works perfectly and you can ride these things for hundreds of thousands of miles and never have a problem. To mount these on there, they come with a bolt that attaches right here, goes right to the stock shock location, goes right in place. I'll show you what I'm doing here, and locks into the swing arm. So you can see down here, I got the mount on. You can see it pivots down, locks into the swing arm. When the shock is attached, it's always pushing down into the swing arm. Very strong, very stable. Now these only work on models from 2002 up, because the previous model swing arms are not strong enough for this type of a system. We do not recommend using anything other than a stock mounting location on a pre-2002 swing arm. Sorry, again, I'm solo, so be patient with me. I'm not a cameraman. So with the setup, with this mounting kit on here, this gives us more options now. So now we can run a longer travel shock, the 14 by 3.5, which keeps the bike at stock ride height comparable to a 12-inch shock and a little bit lower than a 13-inch shock, a stock shock would be. Part of the problem with stock shocks is they don't have adequate sag. Sag is a very important factor in ride quality. And with a 13-inch shock on a touring model, you typically have about an inch of sag, which is kind of minimal, really, for these bikes. These are heavy bikes. So, and you're only street riding. We're not doing off-roading with these things, so we only got to be good on the street. We don't have to jump it. Well, some guys may, but we don't have to do that kind of thing. So what we want to do is make the best use of the range of motion we have. We have a limitation to the axle nut and the muffler. Unless we have a shorter exhaust, then of course we don't have that issue. But we also have the issue going the other way with tire clearance in the fender. So we've got a minimum compressed length and a maximum extended length that we work inside to make sure everything works. You know, if you have a shorter exhaust, we can make longer shocks, raise your ride height, do a lot of other things with it. But for, let's just keep it to the standard type bike with the full length exhaust system, because that's where the restrictions are at and the limitations. So to get the best ride quality in there, we want to have a real deep sag. Deep sag gives us a much better ride over the road because it keeps the rider isolated. You know, see, when the suspension is in a neutral position with deep sag, so we're going to run about 1.5 inch sag. What that 1.5 inch sag does for us, it keeps the suspension in a neutral zone. So we've got equal travel going up and down. That way we can go through dips in the road, holes, and we don't have to feel that impact of the whole bike going into that hole. When the suspension can extend, it can follow into that dip or hole, and then the bike can come in later. It's a delayed reaction. It's smoother. It's less impact to the rider. Same thing going over bumps. If we have enough travel to absorb that bump and the correct spring rate and dampening, the rider don't feel that impact. It's about minimizing the impact to the rider, delivering the best ride possible. But there's other benefits too. It keeps the tire in contact with the road. This keeps you more stability, more control, better braking, better cornering. The bike will handle overall better with quality suspension like Super Shocks. So once we get our mounting kit on there, you know, we can then tighten up that bolt and install our shock. So this can give us options for, like I said, a 14 by 3.5 shock with more travel, extended travel, gives you a little lower ride height than the stock 13-inch shock and the same as the stock 12-inch shock. So for a street glide guy with a stock 12-inch shock or a road glide that has a stock 12-inch shock, we can pick you up 1.5 inches of shock travel. That's a huge amount. It's going to dramatically change the ride of that bike. For the guy that has the 13-inch shock bike, the Ultras, the bigger bikes, the taller height bikes, we give you more travel yet than they have, 1/2 inch more. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that's the difference between a bottom out and not a bottom out. So that's the difference between a good ride and a bad ride. So with our 14-inch shock on here, we can mount it right on there. And then this could give us options for lower height as well. So like I said, we have a 13.5 or a 13 by 3. With the 13.5 by 3, we can lower the ride height. So it's at a 10, let's go back a step. Our 14 by 3.5 has an 11.5 inch ride height, which is the same as a stock 12-inch shock and a 1/2 inch lower than a stock 13-inch shock. So a stock 13-inch shock with the rider on board, you measure the ride height from the top shock bolt to the bottom swing arm mount, and you're going to find that you're at 13-inch shock will be at 12 inches, 11 7/8, right in that range. A stock 12-inch shock is going to be about 11.5 inches. Only a 1/2 inch of sag. That's not nowhere near close enough. So with our 14 by 3.5, we're going to have an 11.5 inch ride height. With our 13.5 by 3, we're going to have an 11-inch ride height, so a 1/2 inch lower yet than a street glide or an inch lower than an Ultra. With our 13 by 3, now we're even an inch lower than a street glide with an inch more travel in the suspension. So it's a huge difference. Even an inch lower, way better ride than stock. Way better ride than any other combination you can put on here. For the Ultra guy, that's an 1.5 inch drop. That's a huge drop. Not normally what most guys would want or need, but definitely possible if you need to get that bike lower for reach and comfort and confidence, way the bike works for you. So it's about personalizing the ride to the way you need it to be for you. By doing this, it changes the way the shock works, because now the shock is further back and it's on more of an angle. So we have to tune these shocks differently. So these shocks are specifically set up to work in this location on that mount, so that we don't take the same shock and just move it back. It's the same parts and pieces, but it's set up completely different, and everything's based on rider weight and shock location. These are some of the things that we're doing here to really get a quality ride out of these bikes and make them feel unbelievable, give you a night and day difference. This is what Super Shocks is all about. We're about making your ride more fun to ride. If you want to know more, take some time, give us a call, check out the rest of our videos. We're here to help you find a way to make your ride better. Thank you.